You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not broken. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why you've been made to feel that way your entire life. There are 8 specific habits almost nobody talks about. Small things. Things you've probably never said out loud to anyone. And the moment you hear them, you're going to feel a strange, uncomfortable recognition, like someone has been quietly watching your life from the inside. The 8th one is the one that changes everything. It's the piece that makes the other 7 finally make sense. So don't leave early, because if you only hear half of this, you'll only understand half of yourself. Let's start with the first one. You replay conversations long after they end. You lie in bed, and a sentence from that afternoon comes back uninvited. You analyze the tone, the pause before they answered, the way their eyes moved for half a second. Most people call this overthinking. It isn't. It's oversensing. You aren't just thinking about the words. You are processing the energy behind them. Somewhere along the way, you learn that missing a signal could cost you something important. Maybe it was a parent whose mood shifted without warning. Maybe it was a house where love had conditions, and you had to read the room just to know which version of it you'd get that day. So you became a translator of unspoken things. You learned to spot the storm before the first drop of rain fell. And even now, long after the danger has passed, that translator never fully clocks out. You find yourself analyzing an email for 20 minutes, looking for a hidden meaning that probably isn't even there. But your brain isn't being dramatic, it's being protective. It's trying to ensure that you are never caught off guard again. Imagine your mind as a high-tech security system that was installed during a time of crisis. The crisis ended years ago, but the sensors are still set to the highest sensitivity. Every rustle of leaves is treated like a potential intruder. This is why you are exhausted. This brings us to habit number 2, which builds directly on top of this. You feel emotionally exhausted after being around people, even people you love, not because you dislike them, not because you are antisocial, but because connection for you was never simple. For you, being in a room with others is like running 1,000 background programs on a computer at once. You are tracking the person to your left's subtle annoyance, the person across from you's forced smile, and the overall vibe of the group. It required vigilance. It required managing not just your own feelings, but everyone else's too. There's a clinical word for this, but the word isn't the point. The ache is the point. The quiet, invisible tax you pay just to exist in a room with other people. You give parts of yourself away in every interaction, leaking energy through every "are you okay?" and every "do you need anything?" By the end of the day, some version of you needs to disappear for a while, just to remember who you are without an audience. You need silence because your mind has been screaming with the noise of everyone else's unspoken needs. That's not weakness. That's someone who spent years being everyone else's emotional room and never had one of their own. But it gets even more specific. The 3rd habit is the one you've probably never even noticed you're doing. You apologize for things that were never your fault. A bump in a crowded hallway, a pause in conversation, someone else's bad mood. Sorry leaves your mouth before you've even thought about whether you did anything wrong. This isn't politeness. It's an old survival strategy, dressed up as manners. Somewhere in your history, conflict felt dangerous. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. Maybe there was a home where peace was fragile, and you learned that shrinking yourself was the fastest way to keep it intact. You became the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who would take the blame just so the shouting would stop, or the cold shoulder would thaw. So you built a habit of taking the blame before it was even assigned, just to keep the temperature in the room stable. You feel responsible for the happiness of people who wouldn't even walk across the street for yours. You apologize for your existence because, at some point, you were made to feel like a burden. Every sorry is a way of saying, please don't be mad at me for being here. There's something hidden underneath this one, and it connects directly to the way you treat the people closest to you. The 4th habit. You give people the benefit of the doubt long after they've stopped deserving it. You make excuses for the friend who cancels again, the partner who forgets what matters to you, the family member who only calls when they need something. They're just stressed. You tell yourself, they had a hard childhood, you whisper. You become a defense attorney for people who are hurting you. Not because you're naive, you are actually incredibly sharp, but because somewhere inside, you believe that if you understand someone deeply enough, you can love them into treating you better. This usually traces back to a relationship where love had to be earned, where affection came with conditions, and where the version of you who tried the hardest was rewarded with just enough warmth to keep trying. You didn't learn to love people easily. You learned to love people patiently, even when the patience was never returned. You are a specialist in potential, loving the person they could be while ignoring the person they actually are. And here's what almost no one tells you about what happens next. The fifth habit. You feel a strange comfort in sad music, quiet rooms, rainy days, not because you're depressed, but because those environments finally match your internal weather. Most of your life, you've had to perform a version of okay that didn't match what you felt underneath. You've had to be the bright one, the stable one, the reliable one. So when the world outside finally mirrors the world inside, when the sky is gray and the music is melancholic, something in you exhales. You don't have to pretend anymore. The rain isn't sad to you. The rain is honest. It's one of the only things that never once asked you to smile when you didn't want to. It's a sanctuary where your depth isn't seen as a problem to be solved, but as a natural state of being. You find beauty in things that others find heavy because you've carried weight your whole life, and you know there's a quiet strength in it. But there's one habit even harder to admit than this one, and it might be the one you recognize most. Habit 6. You struggle to accept compliments, even the ones you know are true. Someone tells you that you're talented or kind or beautiful, and something in you deflects it instantly. A joke, a subject change, a quiet explaining away. Oh, it was nothing. Or I just got lucky. This isn't humility. It's a nervous system that never fully trusted good things to stay. If love and approval were inconsistent when you were small, if you were praised one minute and ignored the next, then receiving them now feels dangerous. It feels like a trap. Like the ground could shift the moment you actually let yourself believe someone means it. You are waiting for the but. You are waiting for the other shoe to drop. You've learned that the higher you are lifted, the further you have to fall, so you stay close to the ground where it's safe. Most people never notice this pattern in themselves. You did, and that alone tells you something about how closely you've always paid attention to your own inner world, even when it hurt to look. The seventh habit is perhaps the most visible but the least understood. You feel most like yourself when you're alone, and slightly like a performer everywhere else, even with your best friends, even with your family. There is a social version of you that is polished, funny, and engaging. But it's a mask, not because you're fake, you aren't a liar, but because somewhere along the way, being fully yourself felt risky. You learned that your intensity was too much for some, and your silence was weird for others. So you built a version of you that was easier for others to accept, easier to love, easier to keep around. And the real you, the unfiltered, uncensored, unapologetic you, got tucked away for safekeeping. It still comes out. Late at night, in deep conversations, in the quiet moments when no one's watching. But it rarely gets to lead. There's an invisible wall between the world and the parts of you that are the most tender. You built that wall yourself, brick by brick, out of moments that taught you it wasn't safe to be fully seen. But walls that are built can also be understood, and that understanding is exactly what habit number 8 is about to give you. The final piece of the puzzle, habit 8. You crave deep connection, but you're terrified of being truly known. You want someone to see every part of you, the messy parts, the scared parts, the too much parts, and stay. You crave a soul-level intimacy that most people can't even imagine. But the moment closeness starts to feel real, some old familiar fear whispers that it won't last, that eventually they'll see too much and leave, or worse, that they will use what they know to hurt you. So you keep one foot out the door in every relationship that matters. You self-sabotage. You go cold when things get too warm. You push people away just to see if they'll fight to stay. Not because you don't care, because caring has hurt you before, and your nervous system remembers what your mind has tried so hard to forget. You are a fortress guarding a garden, and you're terrified that if you let someone in, they'll trample the flowers. And now, all 8 are on the table. Here's the truth underneath every single one of them. None of them are flaws. They are not symptoms of a disorder. They are evidence. Evidence of a child who adapted brilliantly to an environment that demanded constant awareness, constant caution, constant emotional labor. You didn't become this way by accident. You didn't fail at being normal. You became this way because you were paying attention when it mattered most, in a world that didn't always deserve that level of care. These habits were never proof that something is wrong with you. They are proof that you see the world differently, because you had to learn to see it that way to survive it. And here is the part that changes everything, if you let it. What kept you safe as a child doesn't have to define you as an adult. The hyper-awareness that once protected you can soften into intuition instead of anxiety. You can learn to trust your gut without it keeping you awake at night. The people-pleasing that once kept the peace can transform into real, chosen kindness instead of fear-based compliance. You can learn to say no and still be worthy of love. The walls that once shielded you can come down, not all at once, because that would be terrifying, but brick by brick, in relationships that finally deserve to see what's behind them. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were a person who learned to read rooms because someone once needed you to, and you got so good at it, you forgot you were ever allowed to stop. You're allowed to stop now. You're allowed to take up space without apologizing for the air you breathe. You're allowed to receive love without bracing for the conditions attached to it. You're allowed to be fully, completely, unapologetically yourself in daylight, not just in the quiet hours when no one's watching. The habits that once made you feel strange, exhausting, too sensitive, too aware, too much, were never the problem. They were the parts of you that survived something. And they are still here, still trying, still hoping that one day someone would finally understand. Tonight, maybe that someone is you. And that quiet understanding might be the beginning of something you've been waiting your whole life to feel. A sense of peace that doesn't depend on everyone else being okay. A sense of self that doesn't need a mask. Not because everything is fixed. Not because the past has disappeared, but because you finally fully see yourself. If even one of these 8 habits felt like someone finally put words to something you've carried silently for years, that's not a coincidence. That's recognition. It's the sound of a key turning in a lock you didn't even know was there. And if you want to be here for what comes next, subscribe now so you don't miss it. NeuroSoul Lab is a space for people like us, the ones who see too much, feel too much, and are finally learning that it's okay to just be. And before you go, tell me in the comments which habit hit closest to home. Sometimes just typing it out and knowing someone else understands is the first real step toward feeling less alone in it. Read the comments of others too. You'll see that you aren't the only one who has been replaying that conversation from 3 years ago in your head. But seeing yourself is only the first door. Because once you understand why you became this way, a harder question shows up right behind it. One most people spend their whole lives avoiding. If this was never really about you, then whose voice have you actually been living by this entire time? Whose expectations have you been carrying like they were your own? That question doesn't have an easy answer. It requires a different kind of courage to look at. And it's exactly where we're going next. I'll see you in the next video.